Hi, everybody. My name is David Benjamin, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our project exploring generative design in architecture. So this project begins with the idea that we're creating a new office space for Autodesk in Toronto in the building shown here, which is in the Mars Discovery District. So it's 3 floors of a new building. And the process that we're exploring builds upon generative design for manufacturing, which hopefully people have heard about by now and seen some interesting examples of. So this diagram shows how generative design for manufacturing works. And basically it allows you to define high-level goals and constraints and then use the power of computers and automation to explore a very wide design space and search for designs that meet your needs and that are in many ways optimized. And so our idea for generative design in architecture was to use a very similar workflow and to basically use the power of computer automation to start with an architectural design problem by defining its high-level goals and constraints, and then use the power of automation to explore a very wide design space. So generative design for architecture involves many of the same things as generative design for manufacturing, but in many ways the goals and constraints are more complex and there are more stakeholders. So now I'm going to give you a sense of exactly how this worked for this experimental project. Step 1 was to gather data. And here we were interested, as you may have heard Jeff Kowalski explain on main stage just now, we were interested in thinking about in architectural design what makes for the best human experience. And in order to do this, we conducted a lot of interviews with both individuals and teams that were going to be working in this new Autodesk workspace. And we kind of compiled data about this very kind of complex set of criteria that each of the individuals and teams had. Their preferences for things like work environment, and proximity to amenities and proximity of teams that are collaborating with one another. Step number 2 is defining the goals. So for us, this was a process that was not inevitable, but was actually a part of the kind of creative act of design in architecture. And here we honed in on and designed 6 different goals that we thought would make this space a good space to work. 6 different goals that were measurable. And this will give you a sense of basically how we defined the goals. So the first goal was adjacency preference, and this basically means minimizing the travel distance between collaborating teams and preferred amenities. The second goal is work style preference, and this means basically taking each team and looking at the suitability of its neighborhood or its location to its preferred light and acoustic levels. The third is buzz, and this is basically defined as maximizing the activation of shared spaces through individual and team movement. Fourth is productivity, and this means minimizing visual and audio distraction. Fifth, shown here, is daylight. This is probably obvious, but it's maximizing the availability of natural daylight in the office. And finally, the 6th goal was views to the outside, and this is defined as maximizing the exterior views from desks and circulation paths. So after we have these goals, we started by, the next step, step 3, was specifying the constraints. So here you see kind of the perimeter of the floor plan, one of the 3 floor plans, and we're marking out a fixed zone shown with this hatched area and a zone that's open to generative design, which is shown as this open dark area. And you see these dashed red lines as the kind of center lines of the open areas. So this is basically specifying the constraints, just taking the floor footprints in the existing building, the locations of things that can't be moved, such as circulation or mechanical rooms, and making that off limits, and then defining the zone that's open to design through generative design and through the use of the computer. Step number 4 is defining a geometric system. So this was again part of our creative design, and we created a system that started by defining different neighborhoods, which are identified by these red circles, shifting the neighborhoods that will cause different boundaries between neighborhoods to shift, creating amenity rooms along the walls between neighborhoods, and then filling the rest of the area in with desks. So without needing to know the details, you can see that we designed a geometric system to allow us to create many, many different designs by varying a few input parameters. Step number 5 is the kind of true magic of using the computer to help solve this problem, and it's basically automation. So here we're using the computer to generate, evaluate, and evolve literally 10,000 different design options for this office space. Each design option is defined by a point here, and you see them kind of generating over time. And the great thing about these data points is that we know exactly what input parameters were used to create each point, and we know exactly how each data point or each design option performs according to the 6 goals that we've defined for the system. So it's a very rich data set. We can color code according to different types of designs or families of designs. We can look at all of the different scores for the goals that we have and navigate between often competing objectives or goals for the system to hone in on a design that we think is very high performing, but also I think, and this is important, is a design that is kind of unexpected, that goes beyond what we could design without this system. The final step of the process that we're very excited about is that this generative design model is not done once the space is constructed. In other words, this is a rich data-based, data-informed model that can be used continually after the project is built. So, for example, if the company gains a new team, or if the teams reorganize, we can recompute the data and suggest ways to adapt the space over time. If we're monitoring things like productivity, daylight, temperature over time in the office space after it's built, then we can validate some of our computational algorithms and potentially suggest ways to reorganize the office or ways to refine the algorithms for computing the next office space that we design in this way. In the end, we're able to use generative design to do something that we couldn't do in the typical design process. But also, it's important to note, we're able to use the best of traditional design. In other words, we're able to define materials, geometric strategies, different layout principles that are the best of what we already know through a long history of human expertise and creativity and intuition. So here's an example of what the 3 floors of the office space look like together, and some of the features in the office space. So we think it's a kind of unique and exciting office space that also is one of the first, it's going to be one of the first built examples of generative design for architecture at this size and scale and this amount of complexity. So finally, to conclude, I just want to note that generative design for us in this project is not just about efficiency. It's not just about a simple kind of optimization. But it's also about creativity. And to use some of Jeff Kowalski's words, it's about augmenting human intuition and creativity. For this process, and as we think about using generative design in the future for architecture and other possibilities, I think we'll think about, instead of designing fixed forms and solutions, we will be thinking about designing goals and constraints. Instead of reviewing a few dozen design options that are designed by human intuition, we will be exploring a few thousand design options designed by data. And kind of my final note is that I think generative design allows us to kind of break through and go beyond some of our typical human linear thinking, our typical rules of thumb that we've established over time that may not encapsulate everything we want out of design, and it basically allows us to discover new possibilities. Thank you.